Martha stood by the window, watching the rain trickle down the glass as her son Thomas packed her belongings into a worn suitcase. The bedroom that had been hers for over 40 years now felt foreign, like she was already a guest in someone else's home. Outside, the oak tree she and her late husband Frank had planted when they first moved in swayed in the autumn wind, its leaves turning golden and red. "You don't need all these old photo albums," Thomas said, tossing one aside without looking at the memories inside. "The nursing home room is small. You can only take what's necessary." Martha bit her lower lip, fighting back tears. She wanted to speak up, to defend the worth of those precious memories, but the words caught in her throat. 6 months ago, when Frank passed away after a brief battle with cancer, something in Thomas had changed. The caring son who once called her every Sunday had gradually transformed into a cold, calculating stranger who saw her as nothing more than a financial burden. "The van will be here in an hour," Thomas continued, checking his expensive watch, the same watch Martha had noticed him buying just weeks after Frank's funeral. "We need to be efficient." Martha nodded silently and picked up the discarded photo album, running her wrinkled fingers over its worn cover. Inside were pictures from Thomas's childhood, his first bicycle ride, fishing trips with Frank, family vacations to the lake house. She wondered if he remembered any of it or if those memories had been replaced by spreadsheets and calculations of her cost of living. The modest 3-bedroom house had been paid off for years. Frank had been careful with money, working as a high school history teacher while Martha took care of the home and worked part-time as a bookkeeper for several local businesses. They never lived extravagantly but were always comfortable. What Thomas didn't know, what Martha had kept secret even from Frank, was just how good she was with numbers. "Mom, are you listening? I said you need to decide which clothes to take. The rest will be donated," Thomas said, his voice tinged with impatience. "I heard you," Martha replied softly, tucking the photo album into her handbag when he wasn't looking. That handbag, an old leather one Frank had given her for their 20th anniversary, went everywhere with her. Thomas had no idea that inside its hidden compartment was a small notebook containing account numbers and passwords, the keys to the fortune she had quietly built over decades. The doorbell rang, and Thomas hurried downstairs to answer it. Martha took the moment alone to look around the bedroom one last time. The faded wallpaper with tiny blue flowers that she'd chosen with Frank, the small crack in the ceiling from when a storm had damaged the roof 15 years ago, the slight dip in Frank's side of the mattress where he had slept for 42 years. "Mrs. Wilson?" A young woman appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "I'm Lily from Sunset Gardens Assisted Living. I'll be helping with your transition today." Martha nodded, noticing how the woman avoided making direct eye contact, instead scanning the room as if assessing what remained to be packed. "It's a lovely facility," Lily continued, her voice cheerful in that practiced way of someone trained to put a positive spin on difficult situations. "You'll have 3 meals provided daily, weekly housekeeping, and there's bingo every Thursday night." "Sounds wonderful," Martha said, trying to match the woman's enthusiasm while her heart sank further into her chest. Thomas reappeared carrying some paperwork. "I've signed all the admission forms. Your medical insurance will cover most of the costs, and I've arranged for the remainder to be paid from Dad's pension." What Thomas meant, but didn't say, was that this arrangement allowed him to avoid spending any of his own money on her care. Martha knew that his software company was doing well enough for the new sports car in the driveway and the vacation to Europe he and his wife Jenny had taken last month. "The state covers most of it," he added, as if reading her thoughts. "It's the most practical solution." Martha thought about the $1.9 million she had accumulated through careful investments over the years. It had started with a small inheritance from her mother, just $5,000 that Frank had wanted to use for home renovations. Instead, Martha had secretly invested it, learning about stocks and bonds through books from the library and later online courses she took while Thomas was at school. She had a natural talent for seeing patterns in markets, for understanding when to buy and when to sell. What began as a small side project became her passion, though one she kept entirely to herself. "Can I take my sewing kit?" Martha asked, pointing to the small wooden box on her dresser. Thomas glanced at it dismissively. "I suppose, though I don't know when you'd use it. They provide activities at the home." The sewing kit had been her mother's. Inside, beneath the thimbles and thread spools, was a letter with instructions for contacting Martha's attorney, another secret Thomas knew nothing about. As Lily helped Martha pack her few permitted belongings, Thomas busied himself on his phone, occasionally stepping out to take calls. Martha caught snippets of conversation about property values and renovation costs. It didn't take much to figure out that he was already planning to sell the family home. "I found a nice retirement community," Martha said quietly as Lily folded a cardigan. "Over in Riverside. It has small apartments where I could live independently." "Mom, we've been through this," Thomas interrupted, returning to the room. "Those places are expensive and you need the medical supervision that Sunset Gardens provides. This is the sensible option." What he meant was this was the cheaper option, for him. Martha looked at her son, really looked at him, wondering when money had become more important than her happiness. She remembered the little boy who once cried because a bird had hurt its wing in their backyard, the teenager who saved up to buy Frank a fishing rod for Father's Day, the young man who had once told her she was the best mother anyone could ask for. "The van is here," Lily announced, zipping up the suitcase. "Is there anything else you'd like to bring, Mrs. Wilson?" Martha clutched her handbag closer. "No, this is everything." As they walked through the house toward the front door, Martha paused in each room, saying silent goodbyes. The kitchen where she had taught Thomas to bake cookies. The living room where they had opened Christmas presents each year. The small den where Frank had graded papers and helped Thomas with homework. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray. Their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watched from her porch with sad eyes. Martha and Frank had been part of this neighborhood for so long that leaving felt like tearing out roots. "I'll visit when I can," Thomas said as he helped her into the van. "Jenny and I are busy with work, but maybe we can come for Christmas." Martha nodded, knowing it was unlikely. She had seen how Thomas had distanced himself since Frank's death, his visits becoming shorter and less frequent. The nursing home was over an hour away from his home, a distance that seemed deliberately chosen. "Take care of the roses in the backyard," Martha said as her final request. "Your father planted them for our anniversary." Thomas nodded absently, already looking at his watch again. "I'll make sure the new owners know about them." As the van pulled away, Martha watched her home grow smaller in the distance. But instead of the despair she had felt building all morning, a strange sense of calm began to wash over her. Thomas had made his choice, and now she would make hers. She patted her handbag, feeling the outline of the notebook inside. By tomorrow evening, she would be checking into a hotel, not the nursing home. By the end of the week, she would have contacted her attorney and begun arrangements for her new life. The $1.9 million she had built over a lifetime of careful planning would finally serve its purpose in giving her the freedom to live her remaining years on her own terms. Thomas had no idea what was coming. He thought today marked the end of her independence. Instead, it was just the beginning of her new chapter, one where she would finally put herself first after a lifetime of caring for others. The nursing home van pulled up to a small hotel just outside of town, not to Sunset Gardens assisted living as Thomas believed. Martha thanked the driver, a kind-faced man named Lou who had listened to her story during the hour-long drive. "You sure about this, ma'am?" Lou asked, helping her with her suitcase. "Your son might come looking for you." "He won't," Martha said with certainty. "Not for at least 2 weeks. He's too busy with his life to check on me before then." Lou nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My mother lived with my sister until she passed. Family should take care of family." Martha smiled sadly. "Sometimes family disappoints us, but I've taken care of myself for years without anyone knowing. I'll be fine." After checking into the hotel using cash, Martha sat on the edge of the bed and opened her handbag. From its hidden compartment, she pulled out the small leather notebook that contained her financial secrets. The pages were filled with account numbers, passwords, and notes about her investments tracked over decades. What had begun as a small experiment with her mother's inheritance had grown into something she'd never imagined possible. Martha had always had a gift for numbers. Even as a young girl, she could calculate complex math problems in her head faster than her classmates could write them down. In a different time, she might have become an accountant or financial advisor. Instead, she'd married Frank right after high school and devoted herself to building their home. But that didn't mean she had stopped learning. While Frank taught history at the local high school, Martha had quietly educated herself about the stock market. She started small, investing just $50 here and there from her bookkeeping job. She studied patterns, read financial newspapers at the library, and eventually took online courses when computers became commonplace. By the time Thomas was born, she had already tripled her mother's small inheritance. By the time he graduated high school, her secret portfolio had reached 6 figures. And now, after 45 years of patient investing, careful research, and compound interest, Martha Wilson was worth $1.9 million she had never told Frank. Not because she didn't trust him, but because it had become her own special project, something that belonged just to her in a life otherwise devoted to others. She had planned to surprise him when he retired, to show him that they could travel and enjoy their golden years without worry. But Frank's sudden cancer diagnosis and quick decline had changed everything. Martha picked up the hotel phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. Law offices of Patricia Huang, answered a familiar voice. Patricia, it's Martha Wilson. There was a pause on the line. Martha, I've been trying to reach you. Are you all right? Patricia had been Martha's friend since they served on the school board together 20 years ago. When Patricia opened her own law practice, Martha had become one of her first clients, setting up trusts and legal protections for her growing assets. I'm fine, but things have changed, Martha explained. Thomas has decided I'm better off in a nursing home. He thinks I have no money except Frank's small pension. Patricia's voice hardened. Where are you now? The Hillcrest Hotel on Route 16. I didn't go to the home. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. 2 hours later, Martha sat in Patricia's sleek office, surrounded by law books and the comforting smell of coffee. Patricia's assistant had brought them sandwiches and tea while they talked through Martha's situation. You realize your son has likely already started cleaning out your house? Patricia said, making notes on a yellow legal pad. He'll probably list it for sale within days. Martha nodded, feeling a pang of loss for the home she'd loved, but pushing it aside. The house belongs to both of us. Frank's will left everything to me, but I added Thomas to the deed 5 years ago when Frank got sick the first time. Patricia looked up sharply. That complicates things. He has legal right to sell if he wants to. I know, Martha said. I'm not fighting for the house. Let him have it. I want to start fresh. With $1.9 million, you certainly can, Patricia smiled. First things first, though. We need to secure your funds and find you a proper place to live. Over the next few days, Martha and Patricia worked methodically. They transferred money from Martha's various accounts to new ones that Thomas couldn't possibly know about. They visited retirement communities, finally settling on Oakwood Gardens, an upscale independent living community with private apartments, beautiful grounds, and no nursing staff hovering at all hours. It's perfect, Martha whispered as they toured a bright one-bedroom unit with a small balcony overlooking a garden. How soon can I move in? They have an opening now, Patricia said. Monthly fee is steep at $3,200. But with your assets, I can afford it for the next 40 years, Martha finished with a small smile. While Patricia handled the paperwork, Martha went shopping. She bought new clothes to replace the few Thomas had packed for her, furniture for her apartment, and a new cell phone that Thomas didn't have the number for. With each purchase, she felt a weight lifting. For the first time in her adult life, she was making decisions solely for herself. A week after Thomas had put her in that van, Martha was settled in her new home. Her apartment was smaller than her old house, but it was filled with things she had chosen herself. No faded wallpaper, no sagging mattress, no memories of Frank in every corner. She missed those memories, but there was something freeing about creating a space that was entirely her own. She made friends quickly. There was Walter, a retired engineer who ran the community chess club, Betty, who organized weekly movie nights, and Chen, a former restaurant owner who taught cooking classes in the communal kitchen. None of them treated her like she was helpless or a burden. Here she was just Martha, not a mother or wife, just herself. You should see your face, Patricia said during one of her visits. You look 10 years younger. Martha laughed. I feel it too. I haven't slept this well in years. But even as she built her new life, Martha couldn't help wondering about Thomas. Had he discovered she never arrived at Sunset Gardens? Had he even bothered to check? She imagined him selling off her furniture, painting over the walls she and Frank had chosen together, perhaps even cutting down Frank's beloved oak tree to increase the property value. Have you thought about what you'll say when he eventually finds out? Patricia asked one afternoon as they shared lunch in the community dining room. Martha set down her fork. I've thought about it every day. Part of me wants him to suffer, to feel the same abandonment he inflicted on me. She paused, looking out the window at the gardens. But another part remembers the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best mom in the world. People change, Patricia said gently. Money changes them, Martha corrected. Frank and I raised him to value family above everything, but somewhere along the way he started measuring worth in dollars instead of love. That evening, alone in her apartment, Martha opened her laptop, a new purchase she was still getting used to. She typed Thomas's name into the search bar and found articles about his software company, photos of him accepting business awards,
and mentions of charitable donations to causes that looked good on tax forms. Then she found something that made her heart stop, a real estate listing for her old house.
The photos showed empty rooms, freshly painted in bland, marketable colors. The description highlighted the renovated kitchen and move-in ready condition. At the bottom was a note that all offers would be reviewed in 2 weeks. Following an open house that weekend, just 3 weeks after putting his mother in a van to a nursing home, Thomas had erased every trace of her from what had been her home for nearly half a century. Martha closed the laptop, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment she felt that familiar ache of betrayal. Then slowly she stood and walked to her balcony. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of flowers from the garden below. In the community room across the courtyard, she could see her new friends gathering for their weekly card game. She took a deep breath and made a decision. Thomas may have discarded her from his life, but she would not allow his cruelty to poison her new beginning. She would continue building this life she had secretly prepared for, enjoying the wealth she had created through her own intelligence and patience. And when the time was right, not too soon, but not too far away, she would let her son discover just how thoroughly he had misjudged the quiet, obedient mother he thought he knew. 1 month passed, then 2. Martha settled into her new life at Oakwood Gardens with surprising ease. Her apartment had become a true home, decorated with a few treasured items she'd rescued in her handbag and new purchases that reflected her own taste, rather than decades of compromise. Every morning, she woke early to walk the winding paths through the community gardens. She had joined the finance club, where residents discussed investment strategies and market trends. For the first time, Martha could openly share her knowledge and passion for financial matters without hiding or downplaying her abilities. You have quite the gift, said Walter after she correctly predicted a market shift that saved several club members from significant losses. Were you in finance before retirement? Martha smiled. No, just a bookkeeper with a hobby. My husband never knew how much I enjoyed playing the market. Their loss, our gain, said Betty, raising her coffee mug in a toast. Martha had made real friends here, people who saw her as a whole person with skills and opinions worth respecting. Sometimes she wondered if Thomas had called Sunset Gardens yet, if he had discovered her absence. Whenever these thoughts arose, she pushed them away and focused on her new reality. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon when her past finally caught up with her. Martha was tending to the tomato plants she had started on her balcony when her phone rang. The screen showed Patricia's name. He called my office, Patricia said without preamble. Thomas, he's looking for you. Martha's hand stilled. What did you tell him? Nothing yet. I said I needed to check my files and would call him back. Martha, he sounded frantic. Martha sat down on her balcony chair, watching a hummingbird dart among the flowers below. How did he sound exactly? Worried. Maybe even scared. He said Sunset Gardens called him because you never checked in. He's been searching for you for almost 2 weeks. 2 months it had taken him to discover she was missing. 2 whole months he sold the house, Martha said quietly. Did he mention that? Patricia sighed. Yes. He said he assumed you were at the nursing home all this time. He never checked because he was busy with the house sale and some big project at work. Martha closed her eyes, feeling the sun warm on her face. Part of her had hoped Thomas would have realized his mistake sooner, would have felt immediate remorse for sending his mother away. But 2 months of silence told her everything she needed to know about her place in his priorities. What do you want me to tell him? Patricia asked. I can say I don't know where you are, or I can give him your number. It's your call. Martha thought for a long moment. Don't give him my number yet. Tell him I'm safe and well taken care of. Tell him. She paused, considering her next move carefully. Tell him I'll contact him when I'm ready and not to worry. That's it? For now, Martha said firmly. He made his choice. Now I've made mine. After hanging up, Martha sat for a long time, thinking about the son she had raised and the man he had become. She remembered how Thomas had looked standing in her bedroom, checking his watch as he packed away her life into a single suitcase. She remembered the dismissive way he had tossed aside her photo albums, the ones that held their family history. The next morning, Martha called Patricia back. I've changed my mind, she said. Tell Thomas you've arranged a meeting with me. This Saturday at your office. Patricia was silent for a moment. Are you sure you're ready for that? I'm not sure I'll ever be completely ready, Martha admitted. But it's time. The days leading up to Saturday passed in a blur. Martha found herself distracted during her usual activities, replaying different versions of the coming confrontation in her mind. Some scenarios ended with tears and reconciliation, others with more anger and hurt. She couldn't predict which way it would actually go. On Saturday morning, Martha dressed carefully in a new outfit, tailored gray slacks and a blue blouse that brought out her eyes. She wore the pearl earrings Frank had given her for their 30th anniversary and applied light makeup. Looking in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The woman staring back looked confident, well-rested and years younger than the person Thomas had put into that van. Patricia was waiting outside the retirement community in her silver sedan. You look wonderful, she said as Martha settled into the passenger seat. How are you feeling? Nervous, Martha admitted, but ready. They arrived at the law office 20 minutes early. Patricia showed Martha to her private office, a comfortable room with leather chairs and framed diplomas on the walls. Thomas should be here at 11. Would you like some tea while we wait? Martha nodded, her throat suddenly dry. As Patricia stepped out, Martha moved to the window, looking down at the street below. She watched people going about their Saturday errands, couples holding hands, parents with strollers, teenagers in noisy groups. Normal life continuing all around while she prepared for one of the most difficult conversations of her life. At exactly 11, she heard the office door open and Patricia's professional voice greeting someone. Then footsteps approaching. The door to the office swung open and there stood Thomas. He looked terrible, unshaven with dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes. For a moment, just a split second, Martha saw the little boy who had once come to her crying after a nightmare, seeking comfort only she could provide. Mom, he breathed, relief washing over his face. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the relief was replaced by confusion as he took in her appearance. Her new clothes, her healthy complexion, her calm demeanor. This was not the helpless elderly mother he had sent away. Hello, Thomas, Martha said steadily. Please sit down. Thomas remained standing, staring at her. Where have you been? The nursing home called me weeks ago saying you never arrived. I've been out of my mind with worry. Have you really? Martha asked quietly. It took you nearly 2 months to discover I wasn't where you left me, Thomas flushed. I've been busy. The house sale was complicated and work has been demanding. I was going to visit next month for your birthday. Martha nodded, gesturing again to the chair opposite her. This time Thomas sat, though he perched on the edge as if ready to leap up at any moment. I never went to Sunset Gardens, Martha said simply. I had other plans. Other plans? Mom, what are you talking about? You don't have any money. Where have you been staying? Who's been taking care of you? Martha smiled, and for the first time she saw real fear in her son's eyes. Not fear for her safety, but fear that he had misjudged something fundamental. I've been taking care of myself, Thomas, just as I always have. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder Patricia had prepared. She slid it across the desk toward him. These are bank statements, investment portfolios, and property records. All in my name. Thomas stared at the folder without opening it. I don't understand. Open it, Martha said gently. His hands shook slightly as he flipped through the pages. She watched his expression change from confusion to disbelief as he saw the numbers. Account after account, investment after investment. Nearly $2 million in assets, all belonging to his supposedly penniless mother. This isn't possible, he whispered. Dad was a teacher. You were a part-time bookkeeper. Your father never knew, Martha explained. It started with a small inheritance from my mother. I invested it, studied the markets, and kept reinvesting. Over 45 years it grew into what you see there. Thomas looked up at her, his face pale. Why didn't you tell me? When I was making arrangements for you, when I was worried about paying for your care, why didn't you ask me what I wanted? Martha countered. You decided I was a burden to be managed. You never once considered that I might have resources of my own or plans for my future. The silence between them stretched, filled with decades of assumptions and misunderstandings. Where are you living now? Thomas finally asked, his voice small. At a very nice retirement community. I have my own apartment, friends, activities I enjoy. I'm happy, Thomas. He flinched at the implication that she was happier without him than she had been in his care. You let me think you were missing. Do you know what that's been like for me? Martha felt a flash of anger. Do you know what it was like for me, being packed up and shipped off to a place I never wanted to go? Watching my son sell the home I had lived in for 40 years without a second thought? Thomas had no answer for that. He closed the folder, pushing it back toward her. So why tell me now? Why this meeting? Martha took a deep breath. Because despite everything, you're still my son, and I believe people can change when they see the truth clearly enough. She stood, smoothing her slacks with steady hands. I'm not asking you to apologize, and I'm not offering forgiveness yet. What I'm offering is a chance to start over, to build a relationship based on truth and mutual respect. But only if that's something you want. Thomas looked up at her, really seeing her perhaps for the first time in years. Not as his elderly mother who needed managing, but as Martha Wilson, a woman of intelligence and dignity who had quietly built security for herself while asking for nothing. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Martha picked up her handbag, preparing to leave. You don't need to say anything today. Think about it. My number is in the folder if you decide you'd like to talk again. As she walked to the door, Thomas called after her. Mom, she turned. Are you really okay? Martha smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I'm better than okay, Thomas. I'm finally living my life on my own terms, and it's wonderful. A week passed with no word from Thomas. Martha tried to resume her daily routines at Oakwood Gardens, but found herself checking her phone more often than she cared to admit. Each time the device remained silent, a mixture of disappointment and vindication washed over her. Give him time, Patricia advised during their weekly lunch. You dropped quite the bombshell on him. Martha stirred her soup absently. I'm not sure time will make a difference. Thomas has always been stubborn, even as a child. Once he feels he's been made a fool of, he shuts down. You didn't make a fool of him, Patricia corrected. He made assumptions and never bothered to ask you directly about your finances. Still feels like rejection, Martha admitted quietly. Again. That evening, Martha sat on her balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her tomato plants were thriving, and she had added herbs and flowers to her small container garden. The simple act of nurturing something, watching it grow under her care, brought her a peace she hadn't expected. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart jumped when she saw it was from Thomas. Can we talk? Coffee tomorrow? Simple, direct, no apology or explanation. Typical Thomas. Martha typed back, where and when? They agreed to meet at a small cafe halfway between Oakwood Gardens and Thomas's home. Martha chose to drive herself rather than asking Patricia for a ride. The independence of having her own car's a modest but comfortable sedan she had purchased. Shortly after settling into her new home was something she valued deeply now. Martha arrived early and chose a table by the window. She ordered a cappuccino and watched people pass by on the sidewalk outside, wondering what Thomas would say, how he would look, whether his wife Jenny would accompany him. At exactly 10 o'clock, Thomas walked through the door. He was alone, dressed in casual clothes rather than his usual business attire. He had shaved and looked more put together than at their last meeting, but there was still a weariness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He spotted her and paused for a moment before approaching. Martha noticed he was carrying a large manila envelope. Mom, he said, his voice softer than usual. Thanks for meeting me, Martha nodded. Would you like some coffee? Already ordered at the counter. He sat down across from her, placing the envelope on the table between them. They sat in uncomfortable silence until the barista brought Thomas's black coffee. He took a sip, then cleared his throat. I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week, he began. About you, about us, about the way I've behaved. Martha waited, giving him space to continue. When Dad died, something changed in me, Thomas admitted. I was scared. Not just of losing him, but of what came next. The responsibility of taking care of you. The financial burden I thought it would be. He looked down at his coffee. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for everyone by putting you in that home. You never asked what I wanted, Martha reminded him gently. I know that now. Thomas pushed the envelope toward her. I brought something to show you. Curious, Martha opened it and pulled out several sheets of paper. They were printouts of emails between Thomas and the real estate agent who had handled the sale of their family home. I don't understand, she said, scanning the messages. Look at the dates, Thomas said. I listed the house 3 days after Dad's funeral. Before I ever talked to you about the nursing home. Before I even knew what your wishes might be. I had already decided to sell it. Martha felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Why are you showing me this? Because I need you to know that I understand how wrong I was, Thomas said, his voice cracking slightly. I was so focused on what I thought was practical that I completely disregarded you as a person with your own thoughts and wishes. Martha set the papers down, unsure how to respond. The thing is, Thomas continued, I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing. Dad always handled all the finances. He always told me you weren't good with money, that he had to manage everything. Martha couldn't hide her surprise. Your father said that? Thomas nodded. Many times over the years. He said you were wonderful at everything except finances, that you would be lost without him handling the money matters. Martha felt a bubble of laughter rise in her throat, unexpected and almost painful. And all those years I was the one building our nest egg without him knowing. Oh, Frank. She could almost picture her husband's face, his well-meaning protectiveness that had somehow turned into dismissiveness. Frank had never meant to diminish her, but in his desire to be the provider and protector, he had created a fiction that eventually harmed her. When Dad died, I thought I needed to take over that role, Thomas explained. I never imagined you had not only been handling your own finances, but building a fortune right under our noses. Martha took a sip of her cappuccino, letting the warm, bittersweet taste ground her in the present moment. Your father wasn't a bad man, Thomas. He was a product of his generation. He wanted to feel needed, so I let him believe he was taking care of me in that way. While you were secretly becoming a millionaire, Thomas said, a hint of admiration in his voice. It wasn't about the money, not really, Martha explained. It was about having something that was mine alone, something I excelled at without anyone's help or approval. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. When you decided to put me in that home without consulting me, you did exactly what your father did, assumed I couldn't take care of myself. Thomas winced, but nodded. I see that now, and I'm truly sorry, Mom. The apology hung in the air between them, sincere but incomplete. Martha knew that rebuilding trust would take more than one conversation, more than one admission of wrongdoing. I sold the house, Thomas said after a moment. The sale closed last week. I know, Martha replied. I saw the listing online. What you don't know is what I did with the money. Thomas pulled another document from the envelope and slid it across the table. Half of it is yours. I've put it in an account in your name. Martha glanced at the paper, a bank statement showing a deposit of just over $200,000. Thomas, you don't need to do this. I have more than enough money. It's not about need, he insisted. It's about what's right. Half of that house was yours. Not just legally, but in every way that matters. You and Dad built that life together. Martha felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them away, not wanting to cry in this public place. There's something else, Thomas continued. Jenny and I have been talking. We'd like you to come to dinner next Sunday. The kids have been asking about you. The mention of her grandchildren, 10-year-old Peter and 8-year-old Lily, sent a pang through Martha's heart. In the chaos of the past few months, she had missed them terribly, but hadn't wanted to use them as pawns in her conflict with Thomas. How are they? She asked softly, growing too fast. Peter's building robots now, and Lily's decided she wants to be a veterinarian. Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in months. They miss their grandmother. Martha thought about her new life at Oakwood Gardens, her friends, her activities, her independence. She thought about the family she had been separated from, not just by Thomas's actions, but by her own response to them. I'd like that, she said finally. Dinner sounds lovely. Relief washed over Thomas's face. And maybe you could tell the kids about your secret financial genius? Peter would love to hear how you beat the stock market all those years. Martha laughed, feeling something tight in her chest begin to loosen. I suppose I could share a few tips with my grandson. They finished their coffee, talking about safer topics: the weather, local news, the community garden at Oakwood that Martha had helped design. As they prepared to leave, Thomas hesitated. Mom, there's one more thing I need to ask. Why didn't you tell Dad about the money? Didn't you trust him? Martha considered the question carefully. It wasn't about trust. Your father was a wonderful man who gave me a beautiful life, but he needed to feel like the provider, the protector. My investing was something I did for myself, not against him. She picked up her purse, ready to head back to her car. Sometimes in a marriage, in any relationship really, you keep small parts of yourself separate. Not out of deception, but because having something that's just yours helps you remain yourself within the partnership. Thomas nodded slowly. I think I understand. Will you tell me more about it someday? About how you learned to invest, how you kept it secret all those years? Martha smiled. I'd like that. There's a lot about your mother you never knew. As they walked out of the cafe together, Martha felt a tentative hope taking root. The rift between them wasn't fully healed. That would take time and more honest conversations. But for the first time since Frank's death, she felt like she might eventually have her son back in her life. Not as her caretaker or judge, but as family who respected her for who she truly was. 6 months had passed since Martha and Thomas had coffee together. Summer had given way to fall, and now winter was settling in, bringing chilly mornings and early sunsets. Martha stood in her kitchen at Oakwood Gardens, preparing a batch of her famous gingerbread cookies for the community holiday festival. The past half year had been one of careful rebuilding. Sunday dinners with Thomas, Jenny, and the grandchildren had become a regular event. At first, these gatherings had been awkward, with conversations sticking to safe topics and everyone careful not to mention the nursing home incident. But gradually, as weeks passed, the tension eased. Martha sprinkled flour on her countertop and smiled at the memory of her grandson Peter's face when she had finally told him about her secret investment career. The 10-year-old's eyes had widened with amazement. So you're richer than Dad? He had asked, causing Jenny to nearly choke on her water. I did pretty well for myself, Martha had answered modestly. But money isn't everything, Peter. The real value was in building something that was all mine. Since then, Peter had peppered her with questions about stocks, bonds, and investment strategies. Martha had started teaching him the basics, setting up a small practice portfolio for him to manage with play money. She suspected her grandson might have inherited her head for numbers. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Martha wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it. Thomas stood in the hallway holding a thick manila envelope. Hey, Mom. Sorry to drop by unannounced. Do you have a minute? Martha welcomed him in, offering coffee and cookies. Thomas settled at her small dining table while she finished cutting shapes from the gingerbread dough. These smell amazing, Thomas said. Just like when I was a kid. Same recipe, Martha confirmed. Your father loved these during the holidays. Thomas nodded, a flicker of sadness crossing his face at the mention of Frank. That's actually related to why I'm here. He patted the envelope. I've been going through Dad's old papers from the attic of the house before the new owners moved in. I found something I think you should see. Martha set aside her cookie cutters and sat down across from her son. What is it? Thomas pulled out a leather-bound journal and placed it between them. It was hidden in a box of old teaching materials. I started reading it thinking it was lesson plans, but he pushed it toward her. It's Dad's private journal. And Mom, he knew about your investments. Martha felt the blood drain from her face. She reached for the journal with trembling fingers. What? Read it, Thomas encouraged gently. The entries from about 15 years ago. Martha opened the journal to where Thomas had placed a bookmark. She immediately recognized Frank's neat, precise handwriting. As she began to read, his voice seemed to fill the room as clear as if he were sitting beside her. March 15th, 2010. Found another bank statement Martha tried to hide today. She's getting quite good at covering her tracks, but she forgot about the mail forwarding while we were on vacation. I'm not supposed to know about her secret accounts, but I've known for years. My brilliant, surprising wife has built quite the impressive portfolio right under my nose. I wonder if I should tell her that I know. But watching her quietly triumph with each smart investment brings me so much joy. She thinks I believe she's no good with money. A fiction I created years ago when I realized she was hiding her financial activities from me. I played along, pretending to manage everything while she secretly built her own empire. The truth is, my teaching salary would never have been enough for the comfortable life we've had. Martha's investments have paid for Thomas's college, our family vacations, and will likely fund our retirement, all while I pretended to be the financial wizard of the family. I'm so proud of her I could burst, but I'll keep her secret. It clearly brings her such satisfaction to have this one area that's entirely her own, after all these years of supporting my career, raising our son and putting everyone else first. Martha deserves something that belongs just to her. Martha looked up from the journal, tears blurring her vision.
He knew? All those years he knew?
Thomas nodded. Keep reading. There's more. Martha turned the page, her heart pounding. April 28th, 2010. Martha made another brilliant move in the stock market. I accidentally saw her portfolio statement. She's up almost 14% this year already, while my teacher's pension crawls along at 3%. Sometimes I want to ask her advice for my own small investments, but that would give away that I know her secret. I've decided to set up my own surprise for her. I've been putting away a little each month into a special account. When we retire, I'll present it to her and finally admit that I've known about her financial wizardry all along. Maybe then we can laugh about how we've both been keeping secrets to protect each other's pride. I wonder if she realizes that I see all of her, not just the devoted wife and mother, but the sharp-minded, independent woman who could probably run Wall Street if she'd been born in a different time. That's the woman I fall in love with again every day. Martha closed the journal, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. He never told me, and then he got sick so suddenly. There's one more thing, Thomas said quietly. He pulled another document from the envelope. Dad did set up that special account he mentioned. After he died, it got lost in the shuffle of paperwork. The bank finally tracked me down as the secondary contact. He handed her the statement. It showed a modest but meaningful sum, $43,278. The note with it said, "For Martha, who always knew more about money than she let on. With all my love, Frank." Martha covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by the revelation. All those years they had been keeping the same secret from each other, each thinking they were protecting the other's pride. "He was going to tell me when we retired," she whispered. "He was proud of me." Thomas reached across the table and took his mother's hand. "Of course he was proud of you, Mom. We all are. I'm just sorry it took me so long to see you clearly." Martha squeezed his hand, too emotional to speak for a moment. When she finally found her voice, she asked, "Why didn't you show me this sooner?" "I only found it last week," Thomas explained. "And honestly, I needed time to process it myself. Finding out that both my parents were keeping financial secrets makes me wonder what else I don't know about you two." Martha laughed through her tears. "Your father and I were more complicated than you think. We had a wonderful marriage, but we were still two separate people with our own private worlds." The timer dinged, reminding Martha of the cookies in the oven. As she busied herself removing the perfectly baked gingerbread, she felt a strange sense of completion, as if a circle that had been left open for years had finally closed. "Will you stay for dinner?" she asked Thomas. "I was just making something simple, but there's plenty." "I'd like that," he said. "Jenny took the kids to her mother's for the night, so I'm on my own." As they prepared the meal together, chopping vegetables and setting the table, Martha felt Frank's presence in the kitchen with them, not as a ghost or a supernatural visitation, but in the shared memories and revelations that had brought her and Thomas to this new understanding. Over dinner, Thomas asked, "Have you thought any more about what you want to do with your money?" "That's a lot of wealth to manage," Martha nodded. "I've been thinking about it for months now. I want to do something meaningful, something that would make your father proud." "He was already proud of you," Thomas reminded her. "I know that now." Martha smiled. "But I want to help other people, especially older women who might not have the financial security I built for myself." She told Thomas about her idea, a foundation that would provide financial education and small business grants to women over 60 who wanted to start new careers or businesses. So many of us find ourselves at a crossroads later in life, she explained. After raising families or supporting spouses, we still have so much to offer, but society often makes us feel invisible. The Martha Wilson Foundation, Thomas said thoughtfully. I like it. I could help with the legal setup through my company's attorneys. I'd appreciate that, Martha said. I want to make sure it's done right. As they cleared the dishes, Thomas said hesitantly, Mom, Jenny and I have been talking. The kids miss seeing you more often. We have that extra suite above the garage that's just sitting empty. Martha raised an eyebrow. Thomas Wilson, are you asking your millionaire mother to move in with you? Thomas laughed. I guess I am. But not because you need taking care of, because we want you in our daily lives. The kids adore you. And honestly, your financial advice has already saved me from 2 bad investments. Martha considered the offer. She loved her apartment at Oakwood Gardens and the independence it represented. But she also missed being part of a family's everyday moments. Breakfast conversations, homework help, impromptu movie nights. What if I split my time? She suggested. Keep my place here but stay with you a few days each week? I can teach Peter about investing and help Lily with her science projects. That sounds perfect, Thomas said, relief evident in his voice. We'll set up the suite however you want it. Later that evening, after Thomas had gone home, Martha sat on her balcony despite the winter chill. She wrapped herself in a thick blanket and looked up at the stars, thinking about Frank and the journal entries. You knew all along, she whispered to the night sky. All those years we were both trying to protect each other. In her mind, she could almost hear Frank's gentle laugh, could almost feel his hand covering hers as it had so many times during their long marriage. Martha had started this journey feeling abandoned and betrayed by her son. She had used her secret fortune to rebuild her life on her own terms. But the greatest wealth she had discovered wasn't measured in dollars. It was in the truth that had finally come to light, in the relationships that had been tested and strengthened, and in the future she was now free to shape exactly as she wished. Tomorrow, she would call Patricia to start the paperwork for her foundation. Next weekend, she would help Jenny set up the garage suite for her part-time stays. And next month, she would take her grandchildren on a special trip, just the 3 of them, to show them that life's greatest adventures often came when you least expected them, sometimes even in your 70s. Martha smiled, feeling Frank's approval surrounding her like a warm embrace. She had come full circle, from the woman who had been packed away to a nursing home to a woman fully seen and appreciated for all that she was. The journey had been painful at times, but the destination, this new life filled with truth, purpose, and love, had been worth every step.